fucking all you be on so steady. I'm the realest in the city, yeah, you probably heard of me. I be fucking all you be on so steady. I'm the realest in the city, yeah, you probably heard of me. I be fucking all you be on so steady. I'm the realest, I'm the illest, I'm the steady. She gon' eat me up like a dinner plate. I'm talking about in the worst way, like a cheesecake on a Sunday day. I'm talking about she in there, she in there, she in there, she.
Late one afternoon at the end of August, Cincinnati's Millvale neighborhood seemed wrapped in its usual quiet. But in a single moment, a chilling sound shattered that calm without warning. When police rushed to the apartment on Millvale Court, they were met with a scene the community would never forget. A young woman collapsed, her future severed by a single, abrupt blast. That woman was Taralyn Bowers, 29 years old, a mother of 4 who had just celebrated her birthday and begun carving out a new path to rebuild her life. She had enrolled in nursing school, holding on to the belief that with patience and determination, she could give her children a more stable home, a safer future. But every hope she carried came to a sudden end in that very apartment, a place that should have offered her peace. Taralyn was not a fragile woman. Friends and family described her as a light in dark rooms, someone who knew how to bring laughter to others, someone who gave freely of whatever she had. But it was that very kindness, her belief in second chances, that pulled her into a downward spiral no one could stop in time. This case haunts not only because of its brutality, but because it exposes a painful truth. The warning signs were there all along, in words, in actions, and in messages posted publicly on social media. Everything was there, plain, unmistakable, but it was brushed aside until the price to pay was a life. And that's exactly what makes Taralyn's story so significant. It's a wake-up call to anyone who's ever believed that love can patch over every fracture. If you're willing to stay with me and dive into the details to understand how a strong, determined mother could reach such a tragic end, then stay with me until the very end. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue uncovering stories that are chilling, heartbreaking, and real. Leave a comment to let me know where you're watching from. Taralyn Bowers was the kind of woman you remembered. She wasn't tall, she didn't stand out for her looks, but she had something that pulled people in, an energy that felt alive. She smiled even when life cornered her into its darkest places. At 29, with 4 children and no one else to carry the weight, she was walking that road alone and doing it without complaint. Taralyn was born and raised in Cincinnati. Even as a child, she was the one who took the short end of things quietly, without complaint. She kept her feelings to herself, never wanting to burden anyone. Life wasn't easy, and love had never been fair to her. But even through the pain, she held on to what was good, still believing that everyone deserved a chance to make things right. Just before her 29th birthday, Taralyn made the decision to enroll in a nursing program, a career path that promised stability, and more importantly, the means to raise and educate her 4 children. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice. She planned carefully, applied for tuition assistance, arranged childcare, and slowly began rebuilding a foundation for her entire family. To her friends, Taralyn was the life of every gathering. She loved wearing pink, loved sharing moments of joy on social media. She never hid the fact that she had stumbled, that she had been hurt. On the contrary, she used those very truths to inspire others. And then she met Marshy Luther. He was 25, 4 years younger than Taralyn. Striking appearance, bold personality, and on social media, the type of person no one dared to cross. Luther often called himself Baddest Daddy, a nickname that would later send chills down anyone who heard it. They met at a small gathering with friends. Taralyn was in a vulnerable place, and Luther seemed to know exactly what to say to win her trust. At first, their relationship seemed fine. Luther treated Taralyn's kids as if she were truly in it for the long haul. She bought them gifts, gave them rides, even talked about building a future together. But Taralyn's close friends, and especially her sister, Adrienne Wilson, never bought into the sudden change. Adrienne said that from the very first meeting, something about Luther felt off. Luther controlled how Taralyn dressed, how she replied to messages, even where she went and who she saw. All of it was masked as just caring. At first, Tara Lynn brushed off the concerns. She said Luther was just overly cautious, that a little jealousy was normal in love. But over time, she began pulling away from old relationships, skipping family gatherings, and constantly glancing at her phone every time a message came in. Friends described Luther not as someone who yelled or caused scenes in public. She manipulated by making Tara Lynn feel guilty for choosing herself, and slowly Marshy Luther's name no longer stood for a partner, but for a shadow that weighed down every choice Tara Lynn tried to make. It didn't take long for things to start feeling off. Her sister Adrienne recalled that just a few months into the relationship, Tara Lynn began to change in subtle ways. But it was clear the changes weren't coming from her. She stopped posting pictures on social media. The cheerful, uplifting captions she once shared were replaced by short, guarded phrases. Bit by bit, she stopped showing up at gatherings. And when friends asked why, Tara Lynn would give a half smile and say, "I'm busy," or "She doesn't like me going out too much." Everyone knew who she was, Marshy Luther. To outsiders, Luther seemed attentive. Always by Tara Lynn's side in public. Always the one driving, speaking on her behalf, making decisions for her. But it was that constant presence, that being everywhere, that became truly unsettling. Luther monitored everything Tara Lynn did. She wanted to know who texted her, who liked her posts, who called. Even when she wasn't physically around, she kept control through social media. And it was her own posts that became a string of warnings no one took seriously in time. On her personal page, Luther called herself Baddest Daddy. At first glance, it might have seemed like just a nickname, but underneath were chilling captions. "Don't make me teach you about loyalty. Betrayal comes with a price. If you're gonna play, play by my rules." To casual followers, it might have sounded like tough talk. But for those who understood the dynamic between her and Tara Lynn, these weren't jokes. They were veiled warnings, masked in internet language. Tara Lynn began to live in a state of fear. Every time Luther got angry, she would apologize, take the blame even when she didn't know what she had done wrong. One time, Adrienne overheard Tara Lynn on the phone saying, "If I don't text back right away, tonight's gonna be bad." That tone, it wasn't the playful voice of someone in love anymore. It was the exhaustion of someone being cornered, worn down little by little. But just like so many others trapped in controlling relationships, Tara Lynn didn't leave right away. She believed that if she did everything right, if she was more gentle, more patient, more understanding, things would get better. And that belief, that kindness, made her hesitate. She moved slower than the instinct she needed to survive, slower than the danger that had already begun to close in, hidden behind a face she never imagined would turn deadly. After months of holding back and trying to keep Luther satisfied, Tara Lynn began to show signs of exhaustion. She no longer hid her emotions from family the way she used to. During the rare times she was around friends, she sighed more often, kept glancing at her phone, and seemed constantly on edge. All it took was a late reply, a missed call, and it would spiral into yet another endless argument between the two. By this point, Luther no longer bothered to keep up the act of being the caring girlfriend. Her behavior grew more irritable, more possessive. On social media, her posts became increasingly sharp, bitter, and laced with threats, and they started showing up more and more often. Posts like, "Who thinks they can play me and walk away? Just wait," or "The game ends when I say it ends," started to make people uneasy. But Luther always kept just enough distance, never naming names, never pointing fingers. It was as if she were talking about someone else, in some other situation. But those who knew the truth knew exactly who those messages were meant for. And then came the moment that erased all doubts, the sleepover on the night of the 30th of August. It was a small gathering, organized by Tara Lynn's close friends to celebrate her upcoming enrollment in the nursing program. A rare night of laughter, hugs, and encouragement, the kind of support she hadn't felt in a long time. But what was meant to be a safe space of joy turned into something far more ominous.
C-A-N-E-S-K. Youth everywhere, youth everywhere. Youth everywhere, youth everywhere. Youth everywhere.
The guest list included only Tara Lynn's closest girlfriends. No one had planned to invite Luther. Everyone knew her presence would ruin the atmosphere. But to everyone's surprise, Luther showed up anyway. No one knew how she found the location. Luther walked in unannounced, dressed sharply as if she had planned it all along. Her eyes locked onto Taralyn and never looked away. The room's atmosphere turned ice-cold in an instant. Snide questions, sharp-edged remarks, and dagger-like glances. Luther unleashed them one after another, leaving the group unsettled. Taralyn tried to stay composed, but the anxiety in her eyes was impossible to miss. The gathering wrapped up earlier than planned. One by one, the guests made their quiet exits. Taralyn and Luther were the last to leave the apartment after a tense conversation that dragged on until dawn. The next morning, new posts appeared on Luther's social media. Loyalty is mandatory, not optional. Sometimes, to get respect, you gotta strike first. Taralyn's friends started reaching out, sensing that something was very wrong. But like every time before, Taralyn kept trying to smooth things over, still protecting the image of that relationship as something salvageable. She didn't realize she was inching closer to the edge of a tragedy, and no one around her was strong enough to pull her back anymore. That night, after leaving the sleepover, Taralyn returned home alone. It was the first time in months that she firmly separated herself from Luther. No apologies, no backtracking, no drawn-out conversations. According to her close friend, Taralyn was truly exhausted. She no longer wanted to continue the vicious cycle of tension, reconciliation, and more tension. All she wanted was peace, to begin a new chapter, studying, raising her kids, and starting over. On the morning of the 31st of August, Taralyn woke up early and made breakfast for her kids. Everything seemed as normal as any other day. But family members later recalled that around noon, she began receiving a barrage of text messages from Luther, relentless, one after another. At first, the messages were full of explanations. Then came guilt-tripping, followed by accusations, and finally, a proposal, "We need to talk one last time. No arguments, just talk." Around 3:45 p.m., Taralyn stepped into the apartment at Millvale Court, where Luther was already waiting. According to the investigation report, just seconds after the door closed, neighbors upstairs heard arguing, voices rising, then sudden silence, followed by a single, sharp gunshot. Cold, final. Police immediately secured the scene. When questioned about what had happened, Luther refused to offer a full account. She simply said, "She came to start something. I defended myself." But that brief statement didn't align with the evidence at the scene. There were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds on Luther. On the contrary, everything in the room appeared untouched, neat, undisturbed except for one thing, the bloodstain and Taralyn's motionless body. At 6 p.m., Taralyn's family received the call from police. Adrian collapsed the moment she heard the news. Taralyn's children were at their grandmother's house at the time. They didn't yet know that the morning kiss their mother gave them before walking out the door was the last time they would ever see her again. The investigation continued late into the night. Taralyn's phone was recovered and examined at the scene. The last message from Luther had been sent at 2:57 p.m., just 50 minutes before the fatal gunshot. The content of the message revealed a calm tone, with no signs of threat, which only reinforced the assumption that Luther had deliberately lured Taralyn back by pretending to be composed and reasonable. When the forensic examination was completed, investigators concluded that Taralyn had been shot at close range, the bullet striking directly to the head with no signs of struggle. The pepper spray remained unused. This indicated that Taralyn had no intention of attacking. She only came to talk to end things once and for all, clearly and peacefully. But what she didn't know was that the other person didn't come to talk. The other person came with a loaded gun and an intention that had already passed the point of no return. When Taralyn's body was taken away, the entire Millvale Court neighborhood fell into utter silence. Everyone knew a tragedy had just unfolded. And this time, it wasn't the result of a sudden outburst, but the consequence of a long, ignored series of warning signs. Marcie Luther didn't run. When police arrived, she was still sitting in the room where Taralyn had just taken her last breath. Her face was nearly expressionless, eyes staring blankly into the void. No tears, no clear explanation. She simply repeated one thing, over and over. "She brought pepper spray. I had to defend myself." That claim was quickly dismissed. Investigators at the scene confirmed The pepper spray had never been used. There were no scratch marks, no bruises, no injuries on Luther that would indicate any kind of struggle. The handgun was found near Luther's hand, one round fired, with full identifying traces. Everything in the apartment, from the position of the body, the bullet trajectory, to the cold, unflinching look in the suspect's eyes, pointed in one direction. This was not self-defense. Luther was taken to the Hamilton County Justice Center that very night. On the way to the detention facility, she didn't say another word. When questioned one last time at the station, she simply shook her head and asked for a lawyer. This put an end to any attempts at obtaining a direct statement from her. Investigators were now forced to reconstruct the entire case using the evidence left behind: phone data, text messages, social media posts, and testimonies from witnesses and family members. News of Tara Lynn's death spread rapidly across Cincinnati. Those who had followed her on social media couldn't believe that the smiling, vibrant woman they once knew had been taken in such a tragic and senseless way.
Hi guys. Well, prosecutors say 25-year-old Marshie Luther shot and killed her ex-girlfriend, 29-year-old Tara Lynn Bowers. And today in court, prosecutors argued for a high bond, saying the two women were in a verbal dispute that escalated to Bowers being shot and killed. They say the victim didn't have a firearm, only mace. There's no word on what led up to the argument. Luther pleaded not guilty to murder. Luther's attorney asked the judge to consider a bond of $100,000 at 10%. Her attorney says there is a lot more to this story and that Luther was defending herself.
I would just note again, she's got absolutely no history. She's lived in the area for her entire life. There's nothing to suggest that she is a flight risk. We would ask the court to consider a bond of $100,000 at 10%, and then obviously she can comply with any non-monetary conditions.
But the ones most devastated were her family. Adrienne, the sister who had warned her time and time again, broke down in screams inside the emergency room when doctors confirmed that her little sister didn't make it. Tara Lynn's children were temporarily kept at their grandmother's house. The youngest still asked, "Where's Mommy? Why isn't she home for dinner yet?" The next day, the Millvale community held a candlelight vigil right outside the apartment complex where the tragedy unfolded. People brought pink and white balloons, Tara Lynn's favorite colors. No one spoke loudly. No explanations were needed. Everyone understood. A mother had been stolen, and with her, 4 children were left to grow up in a world without their mother's embrace.
My closest friend, my worst enemy. I'm not okay with being a part of it. I'm enemy. I threw the party up. Let that shit go. Let that shit go. Yeah, mom. Look at this. This looks good on my soul. This is beautiful. You ain't gonna never see no simple clothes. Why would you do that? CT and Daddy, you heard me? Oh my life! Why would they do that? But it was CT and Daddy.
That very night, investigators seized both the victims and the suspects' phones and filed an emergency warrant to extract their social media data. The final message Marshie Luther sent to Tara Lynn carried a calm, soothing tone, like an invitation for a peaceful conversation. That, in itself, led prosecutors to believe the "let's talk it out" offer was nothing more than a trap carefully calculated, deliberately prepared, and one that ended in an irreversible tragedy. Luther was held without bail. At the preliminary hearing on the 2nd of September, her defense attorney entered a plea of not guilty, hinting that they would pursue a self-defense argument. But the prosecution quickly pushed back. They presented data from Luther's phone, GPS tracking, social media posts, and physical evidence from the scene to show that her actions bore signs of premeditation. One of the most damning pieces of evidence came from Luther's own social media, a digital trail of controlling statements, veiled threats toward betrayers, and recurring warnings that those who break the rules will pay. To the prosecution, these weren't just throwaway words. They were patterns of thought cultivated over time. Combined with the calculated move of luring the victim into her apartment and shooting her at close range, it painted a picture of intent rather than impulse. Taralyn's family, especially her sister Adrienne, followed every step of the proceedings. Adrienne refused to let anyone reduce this case to a lover's quarrel. She spoke out publicly, shared screenshots of texts, warnings, and the very words she had told her sister, the ones that, tragically, didn't arrive in time to save her. The official trial has yet to begin, but both sides are bracing for a tense legal showdown. On one side, a grieving family convinced that Taralyn was led into a trap. On the other, a defendant maintaining silence and clinging to the claim of justifiable self-defense. But the question remains, can someone who brings a loaded gun to a conversation with a woman carrying nothing but pepper spray truly call it self-defense? Taralyn Bowers wasn't just another name in the headlines. She was a mother of 4, a sister, a friend, a woman who once believed that genuine love could heal even the deepest wounds. But what she received in return wasn't love. It was control disguised as care, threats hidden beneath sweet words, and in the end a cold, calculated decision carried out without mercy. After Taralyn's death, her family could never be the same again. Her 4 children would have to grow up without their mother. Those who once stood by her side often recall old memories, her radiant smile, the dreams she hadn't yet fulfilled, the life she was just beginning to rebuild. But everything came to a halt in a single afternoon, all because the warning signs were dismissed as just jealousy, just a passing emotion. This case underscores one unshakable truth: control is never the same as love. Any relationship that makes you feel like you have to stay silent, self-censor, or ask permission for even the smallest actions that is not love, that is emotional captivity, and it's all the more dangerous when that captivity is disguised, masked by sweet words, apology gifts, and cryptic social media posts that blur the line between concern and possession. Social media is not the place to challenge someone unstable. Those possessive posts, the public threats, disguised as shade, should never be brushed off as harmless. They may be warnings. They may be the roadmap leading straight to a tragedy no one saw coming. And finally, remember this: a breakup is never a reason to end someone's life. When a relationship shows signs of control and violence, walk away. And never go back just because you hope they've changed. Taralyn went back, and she never got the chance to leave again. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join me in uncovering more chilling, heartbreaking true crime stories, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from.